Please rise to the jury.
Take your seats. Mr. Foster, so that you don't have to stand any longer, let me ask you to please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of law?
I do.
Go ahead and take your seat, please.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Let me give the jury an admonishment. And this is related to what we're trying to accomplish here. You've already heard from what we refer to as rebuttal witnesses. I believe that this is the last of the state's witnesses that are being called forward for rebuttal witnesses. Please understand that the state is not given a second opportunity to retry the whole case. They're given an opportunity to rebut what they believe is necessary that was directly presented during the defendant's case. Now, here to restart the process again. So I have given the parties direction in terms of the guidelines and the direction that we are given as trial courts, which this is trial by either the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court of New Mexico. And it is very specific. This is to refute something that came out during the defendant's case. So I have given direction in terms of narrowing the scope. That the testimony is only relevant. It is responding to information that was provided to the jury during the presentation of the defendant's case. So I have encouraged and asked the defense attorneys, encouraged is the appropriate word, to make objections if they feel that the testimony is going outside of the scope of what is appropriate rebuttal testimony. So I don't want any of you to hold any negative attitude against the defense attorneys if they are making objections, thinking that they're trying to hide something, limit something. There is a specific purpose here. And this witness could testify to things that are very broad. But I have asked that it be kept to a more focused testimony so that it is briefer in nature and focused on what was said during the course of this case. Mr. Foster, and forgive me, is it Dr. Foster?
No, sir, just Joe.
Thank you. Why don't you give us your full and complete name and the spelling of your last name for our record?
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Joseph Allen Foster, F-O-S-T-E-R.
Thank you. Mr. Byers, you can commence with your direct examination of Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Foster, can you describe for the jury your prior law enforcement experience?
Yes, I was with the Albuquerque Police Department for 27 years, the last 19 of which I worked in the crime laboratory as a major crimes detective and forensic scientist.
So you're one of the CSI people, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you were a primary detective for how many homicides?
As a primary on scene investigations for over 350.
And have you provided training for crime lab technicians?
Yes, during my tenure there for a 10-year period, I was the training coordinator for the police department for new field investigators.
Can you describe for the jury some of your professional memberships in professional organizations?
Yes, sir. I was a member of the IAI, the International Association for Identification, the IABPA, the International Association of Bloodstain Pattern Analysts. I was inducted into the Canadian Forensic Society. Also, a group called ACER, which is the Association for Crime Scene Reconstruction, where at one time I was elected to the Board of Trustees for that organization, was the chairman of the board, and also was a past president of that association.
And do you know a man by the name of Lucian Haig?
Yes, I do.
And what is his field of expertise?
Lucian Haig is an expert, world-renowned in the course of shooting scene reconstruction.
Did you co-author any particular books with him?
Well, with his son, I co-authored 2 papers.
Well, he has the right to set some foundations so that the jury can have a sense of the background and expertise of the witness. Go ahead and respond to the question. If you recall, or if you really want to restate it, Mr. Myers.
I remember it. I helped co-author 2 papers on shooting scene reconstruction elements with Mr. Haig's son, Michael Haig, who I worked with at the APD Crime Laboratory. Then in Lucian Haig's book on crime scene reconstruction, Mike and myself helped with a chapter on laser light photography of trajectories through crime scenes.
Have you taught shooting scene reconstruction?
Yes, I have.
To which agencies?
I taught it to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department in California, the Littleton Police Department in Colorado. There was a class put on in Los Lunas, New Mexico, as well as at the Albuquerque Police Department.
Now, are there some major cases that occurred in Albuquerque or anywhere in New Mexico with which you played a major role as a shooting or crime scene reconstructionist?
Yes, there are.
Can you name some?
Some of the Hollywood video murders, Mr. Hyde, the one who shot the 5 people in Albuquerque at 3 different crime scenes. There was a county commissioner who was shot by his estranged wife. I've had a number of high-profile incidents.
Have you testified as a crime scene and shooting reconstruction expert in state district court?
Yes, in district court here in New Mexico, Colorado, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and at the district court level as well in numerous jurisdictions.
Have you appeared? Yes, sir.
Mr. Day, do you have any objection to Mr. Foster being qualified as an expert witness related to crime scene reconstruction analysis?
No, Your Honor.
And we would also tender the witness as an expert in shooting reconstruction, Your Honor.
Shooting reconstruction, any objection to that?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So the court is going to designate Mr. Foster as an expert witness in these 2 areas. So I think he's already given the jury a sense of the background, the extent of the background that he has an experience in now that he's designated as an expert witness. I think the jury will respect the fact that he does not qualify to provide this testimony. So let's go ahead and go on to specific questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Foster, you were in the courtroom today listening to the testimony of Defendant Tai Chan, is that correct?
I don't object to leading questions at this stage.
Well, that's just such a preparatory question. I don't think it will be objection.
Yes, I was.
What did you hear him say concerning his observations when Jeremy Martin was leaving room 711?
His observations were that Mr. Martin had gone to leave the room and that he had maintained custody of his firearm by falling downward to the floor.
Okay. And did you hear whether or not Mr. Chan had indicated if he discharged his firearm?
In the first part of his testimony, he indicated that he was firing from a position while he was still on the floor.
Did you have occasion to look at the evidence that had been submitted in this case?
Yes, I have.
Were you able to determine if there was any bullet strikes or anything else that would indicate that what Mr. Chan said was true?
I had a chance to look at the evidence in association with that entryway
Yes.
to the hotel, and there were inconsistencies in his statement.
What were those inconsistencies?
Well, the casings positions in the entryway, and there are 4 of them, and I believe they're labeled A through D, are an accurate representation of where their final rest is. However, impact sites that emanate in the door frame next to a light switch leading out, and on the opposite wall of the hallway going into room 712 show trajectory angles that would be at a level angle or traveling from an up to downward position.
Would those trajectory angles be consistent with what Defendant Chan said?
At that point, no.
Now, you heard testimony from the defendant about his understanding of the use of force model.
Yes,
Are you familiar with the use of force model?
yes, he was describing something known as the OODA loop that was developed by Lieutenant Colonel John Boyd of the United States Air Force back in the 1960s during the Vietnam conflict. The purpose of that was to train fighter pilots on how to orient and access the things that they needed to do to ensure that there were less planes shot down. In the 1970s, that same process was adapted for police work and the training of police officers.
Is that and what is it that police officers are trained to, how is that training put into application?
Well, as we're dealing with a situation, the acronym for OODA is to first orient and observe what the situation is. From there, there's a decision made on what to do, and then following that is the action. And the action then, once completed, would require you to go right back to the beginning of the model to reassess and orient and follow the process all the way through all over again. So it's a continuing thing.
Based upon your hearing of defendant's testimony, do you have an opinion as to whether or not he followed that process?
Yes, I do.
What is that opinion?
He did not follow that process.
Can you describe for the jury how he did not?
Yes.
Please do.
In the beginning, the statement about a struggle taking place in the hotel room, based on physical evidence that I've looked at, was able to make a determination of where he would most likely be during the course of this. From that point, when, as he describes, Mr. Martin leaving the hotel room, he would have to change positions in advance in order to get those shots. Again, he would be observing that the subject is moving away from him, has his back to him, and that the threat level at that point has ended. Then from there, from the entryway into the hallway, he pursues again and has to extend himself far enough into the hallway to see what's going down that direction toward the elevators. And with that, again, he would have a time to reorient, observe, decide what to do, and take action.
Based upon his testimony, what did he say he decided to do?
He did not describe doing that over and over again, following that OODA loop. He just said that he ran after the subject because he still perceived a threat.
How consistent is that with your understanding of how law enforcement officers are trained?
It is not. Part of what I do, I also teach concealed carry to civilians. And even at the level for civilians, they are taught that when a threat disengages and goes away, the opportunity to shoot is moot.
May I have a moment, Charlie?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Byers.
Ask the witness, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Day or Mr. Clark? Thank you. Mr. Day, could you proceed with your cross-examination, Mr. Wilson?
Good afternoon, Mr. Foster.
Good afternoon, sir.
Now, you know, the trial in this case began on May 23rd, right?
Yes, sir.
That's when you picked the jury, right?
Yes.
And testimony began on that next day, right?
Yes.
Okay. Your first involvement in this case came just a couple of days before that, right?
That's correct.
And at that time, you didn't know what you were going to do because you were on vacation in Utah, right?
That's correct.
And all you knew was that Mr. Byers, the lawyer for the district attorney's office, wanted to pay you to come in here and testify about something, right?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Good. You want me to repeat that question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All you knew at that time, it's about 2 weeks ago now, all you knew was that Mr. Byers wanted to hire you to come in here and testify about something in this case, but you didn't know what it was, right?
I understood that it was a shooting resulting in a homicide, and that was it. I had had no look at any photographs, diagrams, or any reports of any kind on this case.
Right. And in fact, you hadn't received any reports, photographs, diagrams. You hadn't received anything on May 20th of 2016, just about 2 weeks ago, right?
That's correct.
And that day, May 20th, you knew that a pretrial interview had been set up by Mr. Byers in his office so that we could all get you on the telephone. You were still in Utah at that point, right?
That's correct.
You were fly fishing, right?
Well, yes, I was up there for my daughter's wedding and worked out some fly fishing into it at the same time.
So it was a good mix. That worked out well. So.
And Mr. Day, just be a little bit careful and patient and allow for full response to give the question.
I will, Your Honor. So we called you on the phone on the 20th, right?
Yes, sir. I spoke to you by cell phone, or to your representatives by cell phone.
Right. But the problem was that at that point, and this wasn't your fault, but at that point you couldn't offer any opinions based on the fact that Mr. Byers' office had not sent you any reports or photographs or diagrams or charts or anything, right?
That's correct. I hadn't received anything yet.
So that was a pretty short pretrial interview, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And then on May 26th, you were informed that a UPS envelope had arrived at your house, right?
That's correct.
But you were still up in Utah on vacation.
Actually, by that time, I had gone up to Montana and was down in Colorado.
And you didn't get home until May 29th, right?
I got home the evening of the 28th and then opened the envelope on the morning of the 29th to start looking at what I had.
Okay. And so by that point, this trial had been going on for six days. You'd agree with me, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And so your first time you saw anything in connection with this trial sent by the district attorney's office was on the 29th. And on that day, you got 3 CDs containing some reports, right?
Yes,
Some diagrams,
yes.
some scans.
The scans I didn't get until later because what was on the CD would not open for me.
Okay, so you had some problems opening up the CD.
Right. But on the CDs that were sent, there were over 1,000 photographs of this investigation.
Right, it was actually 1,085 photographs, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so the first time you began looking at this material, we had already been here in this courtroom in trial for about a week, right?
I believe so, yes.
And you put together a real quick report that you all just provided to us this afternoon, right? It's about 4 pages.
Well, on the 29th and 30th, after reviewing the case for 2 days, I produced a 3-page report that was faxed over to the DA's office on the 31st.
Okay. And in that report, and in your testimony just a few minutes ago, you talked about some things that you were made aware of in connection with this case, and those things included your belief that an apparent physical confrontation took place between Tai Chan and Jeremy Martin in that hotel room, right?
That's correct.
And you identified some things in your report that you thought were noteworthy, right?
That's correct.
And one of those things was that photographs of both Tai Chan and Jeremy Martin showed scratches on their forearms, right?
Yes, it did.
And that Jeremy Martin had a pair of cuts over his left eye, or lacerations as you call them.
Yes,
And that Tai Chan had blood coming from his nostrils and puncture wounds to the inside of both his upper and lower lips, right?
that's correct.
And that Tai Chan also had a scratch along the right side of his neck, right?
That's correct.
There were a couple things you left out, though, weren't there?
Not aware.
Well, you left out the fact that Jeremy Martin had bruising along the knuckles of his right hand, right?
There were some OMI photographs, and yes, you are correct. There is some bruising on that hand.
And you left out the fact that Jeremy Martin had a black gunpowdery substance or powdery substance on the palm of his left hand and his fingers, right?
I know that there was some substance there. What it is specifically, I don't know.
Well, you didn't test it, right?
No,
And for all you know, no one ever tested that.
I have no knowledge of it, no.
So in your line of work, it's important to be precise, isn't it?
That's a very good question. As a police officer, the relaying of accurate information is paramount.
And that's a good thing in your line of work, because you don't want to come here and tell this jury, well, I did these things based on faulty information or incomplete information or partial information, right?
That's correct. The reporting of information in a case can be very critical. And it starts from the very beginning of the incident all the way through.
Now, you testified just a few moments ago that regarding your opinion about how the incident and the shooting in the room 711 at the Hotel Encanto might have taken place, right? That was your
Yes.
opinion. All right. And were you present in the courtroom when Dr. Phil Trompeter talked about police officers being able to fire 10 shots in 2.5 seconds?
I was not inside the room for that, but based on my training and experience, I do know that that is possible under certain criteria.
Now, you talked about what your perceptions, your opinions were based on the information that you just started putting together about 2 weeks ago in this case. But the fact is you were not in the room that night, were you?
No, I was not.
And no one drew a gun on you in the room that night, did they?
No,
And no one punched you in the face that night, did they?
no.
Mr. David, really, I mean, I was very careful scripting, the direct examination, those kind of questions that everybody knows the answer to. So please go on.
Of course, Your Honor. So, Mr. Foster, you just told us that it's important for you to be precise, to be exact, to give your testimony to the jury based on the precision that is important to you as an expert witness and someone who has forensics as a livelihood, right?
Yes.
So in this case, what you wanted to do, you told the jury that you had come to some conclusions based on your analysis of where these defects were, or the shell casings were, and things like that, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So you went to the hotel in Kanto and you performed a trajectory analysis in room 711, didn't you?
I was not able, I did go, when I arrived here, which was on June 1st, I was escorted to that hotel.
Can you just answer my question, please?
Okay, well, yeah, I went there to find out if I could. But,
Wait,
sorry.
don't open that, please. I know that it's late in the day, but if you ask him a question, you let him respond.
It's a yes or no. Did you perform a trajectory analysis?
Ask the question again, then, Mr. David.
Did you perform a trajectory analysis?
Not in 711, no.
You performed no trajectory analysis.
Not in room 711.
Did you use any trajectory rods in room 711?
No.
Did you use any lasers in room 711?
Objection, ask and answer. And
No, I
at this
haven't
point,
asked that.
argumentative.
Did you use any lasers in room 711?
No.
In fact, what you did is you picked another room that you thought might be similar to room 711, and you went into that room and thought, well, maybe this is close enough, and I'll be able to do my work in this room, right?
Well, the reason we went,
Yes or no?
joined the room,
That's a yes or no
because
question.
711 was occupied.
Your Honor, can I ask a witness to answer the question, please?
Again, Mr. Foster, it is late in the day. I'm not going to let this happen to the jury.
Okay.
If you ask
I
the
appreciate
question,
it.
if you did your analysis in another room, the answer is yes.
Yes, I did.
And it was room 705.
Yes, sir.
And you think that's close enough to room 711, right?
Based on what I was given, yes.
But you never actually saw room 711.
To be inside it specifically?
Yes.
No.
You didn't go inside room 711. You picked room 705. And in fact, room 705, even in your own report, you write, room 705 was the reverse of room 711, wasn't it?
That's correct.
And so what you didn't do is you didn't come to this courtroom and grab the exhibit that is the piece of ceiling tile that was taken from room 711, and you couldn't go and match that up to the existing ceiling of room 711, could you?
No, I had no opportunity to do that.
Right. So what you want this jury to understand is you didn't go to the room where the shooting took place. You went to another room that, in your view, might be similar, even though it was the reverse layout of room 711.
That's correct.
And that's what you're basing your testimony on.
Yes.
And that's good enough for this jury, right?
Well, based on what I'm given, it's the best I can provide at this time.
It's the best you can provide. It's close enough, right?
The goal is to try to be as accurate as possible, and with what I have, that's the best I'm able and allowed to do right now.
But you've never seen the inside of room 711.
No, I have not.
Have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, go ahead. Mr. Davis, does that complete your cross?
Pass this witness, Your Honor.
Mr. Biden, you wish to redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, now that the defense has asked those pertinent questions that are permit us to go into those other areas.
Don't reach any conclusions. Go ahead and ask your questions.
Mr. Foster, on direct examination, did I ask you any question concerning the content of your report, or were my questions associated with your observations and of the defendant's testimony in court today?
You asked me just about the defendant's statement.
Just his statement in court.
Yes.
Everything else that the defense attorney had asked you is intended to disparage the state and not address the issue, correct?
Just leading the witness to
Sustain.
sustain.
Well, you can lead a witness because it's an expert witness, but you can't engage in those kind of comments that aren't related to asking specific questions of the witness. So please, limit yourself to what the guidance that the court has already given.
I will, Your Honor. What is shooting from a barricade position?
Objection, this is beyond scope.
I can't make that determination. Go ahead, Ms.
Shooting from a barricade position is using existing structure to provide support for your shooting stance that would steady your aim.
When a firearm is shot from a barricade position, is there ordinarily gunshot residue that marks the wall?
In that situation, it can be extremely likely.
You reviewed a number of photographs in this case, right?
Yes, I did.
Did you see any gunshot indicators of gunshot residue on the walls or corners anywhere near room 711?
No, I did not.
What would that indicate to you?
As a trained police officer, the idea is not to expose yourself, especially in a situation where you may be getting fire returned at you. And so this would minimize your exposure to the person that you're facing.
What does pieing a corner mean?
Pieing the corner means, again, to only limitedly expose yourself as you come around a corner to see what's going down the hallway ahead of you, or situation ahead of you.
Based upon Defendant Chan's testimony, did he do that?
No,
Would he have been trained to do that in an academy or later on?
I believe so.
You heard the defendant talk about where he went, and he said that he went toward the elevators.
Judge, again, this is beyond the scope of my examination.
But not beyond the scope of the guidance of the court's given. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. He said that he went toward the elevators. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, what did he say he thought Jeremy Martin was at that time?
At that time, he said he could no longer see him and
And
was concerned for his safety.
he had also said that at that time he did not see Jeremy Martin with a firearm. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, trained police officers in that, you're shooting reconstruction expert, right?
Yes, sir.
Trained police officers in that situation are trained to do what?
Number one is to get backup, which Mr. Chan did indicate possibility of, but did not accomplish. The second would be to hold a safe position until assistance can get to you.
Does a police officer owe a sense of obligation to protect the public to what they perceive to be a known threat?
Yes, they do.
What actions, if any, from defendant's testimony were you able to ascertain that he did to try to protect the public from what he claims to be a threat?
I don't recall any in what was in the statement.
When defendant Chan testified, how did he describe the reason why he was at the top of that stairwell?
He described it as there was a scary situation and that he did not know the whereabouts of Mr. Martin, and he had retreated to an area that he perceived to be safe.
Did he say he was hiding?
Yes.
Is that what normal police officers do?
No.
Pass the witness.
Thank you. Mr. Day, recross-examination, Mr. Paulson.
Yes, sir. You just testified that, in your opinion, Mr. Chan wasn't doing anything to protect the safety of the public. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, were you here, I don't know if you were here that, you probably weren't, I think you were fishing still, but early on in the trial, Mr. Erasmus Bravo, a law enforcement officer, guest at the hotel, testified that he saw Tai Chan in the hallway, and Mr. Chan said to him, "Call the police, call the police, call the police, call 911. And that's an effort to get help, isn't it?
That would be. I was not here for that testimony.
But it's an effort to get help, right?
Yes, it is.
No more questions.
Does the jury have any questions of Mr. Foster? Let me have the attorney's approach, please. Mr. Foster, the jury has some questions for you. And again, please understand that these may be questions from lay individuals that are not experienced in the field
Yes, Your Honor.
that you're involved in. How long does it normally take, we're talking about the length of time, to be able to review a case situation and come up with a conclusion for the preparation of the report?
Actually, a pretty good question. It depends on the size and scope of everything that transpires in the investigation. In this situation, this is fairly complex. It goes from what the Las Cruces Police Department had investigated to include a hotel room, a couple of hallways, a stairwell, hotel lobby, and unmarked vehicle parked in the parking lot. So there's a considerable amount of evidence collected in this. So yeah, it could be very extensive. When I got back to...
And again, I think the question is more simple, like how long would it take? What's the average time?
I've had some that are as complex as a couple of months and some that could be done in a matter of days.
Let's see, a casing, a shell casing, was located close to the bed by the window and chair located in the corner by the window. You know what this question is referencing.
Yes, that's in regards to casing J.
Where would the pistol have to have been fired for a casing to have landed in that position? And I want you to answer that question by, again, with your understanding of what other possible reasons could cause that, based on your knowledge of what has been testified to occurred in the room during the course of the shooting.
Yes, Your Honor. The casing is most likely landing in that position because the firearm used is a Glock semi-automatic pistol. They're designed to expel that fired casing to the right and rearward. And based on that, when it falls into the surrounding environment, it could deflect off other things and come to final rest wherever that may be. Based on that, I believe that the shooter was most likely along what would be the side of the bed where the blood transfers on that comforter are located. That would be very consistent with where the casing then comes to final rest, because that would be to the right, across the room, and slightly rearward.
So your testimony is that the shell would cover the distance of the two beds?
Yes, Your Honor. That's correct.
Does the jury have any further questions of Mr. Foster? Mr. Foster, thank you very much for your testimony. You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Any further witnesses by the state?
No, Your Honor.
And you serve the level of defendant?
No, Your Honor.
Then, thank you for the attention that you paid today. It's been a very long day. I'm going to go ahead and excuse you. I'm going to ask you to be back here at 8:30. And if there's anything that would change, then I'll have the jury give you a call. If you do not receive any call to give you a different reporting time on Monday, please be here and ready to proceed to the final portion of the trial.
Your Honor, may we approach him before you discharge him?
All right, yes, sir. Stand by for a change. Okay, so nothing changes the reporting time to 8:30. But again, let me again caution and admonish. You understand, you see the cameras here, that there is coverage of this matter. Let me again plead with you, do not in any way attempt to inform yourself of any other source of information related to this trial other than what you have heard here in the courtroom. Make every effort to avoid paper comes to your house, ask someone else in the family to take the front part of it,